So once you've gone through the lab and you've taken some screenshots, your job is to make a multivariate map, but not of divorce. Find some other variables that you could use to make an interesting map. I would take a look at the color wheel, see what kind of color scheme would work well together. So I'm going to, actually, I'm going to change that real quick. Oh man, I can't change it that way. I don't want to change each one. There we go. Maybe I want to change that one. I've got yellow. I'm going to try green. I can live with that. Okay, so now kind of comes the other part of your brain part of this. So I'm going to go ahead and do the data frame. I'm going to put a black background color on it. Change that. Okay, so I have oceans. I'm going to put a little bit of a darker color on those states. Okay. Now, trying to map all of the U.S. is a problem because Alaska and Hawaii are way out here, so I'm going to have to, oh, come on. Let's go zoom to the layout. I would have to kind of zoom out to there so that I could see everything. So that's really not effective. So what I need to do is I'm going to focus on the continental U.S. Now, it has a longer expanse east-west than north-south, so I need to change my orientation of my paper. So I want it landscape and landscape. I'm going to move those bounding boxes. And this time I can't hit zoom to layer because it's going to give me Alaska and Hawaii. So I've got to just focus on this and then maybe zoom that around. Now, that's perfectly fine for this lab. You can add your legend. You can add your title, scale bar, projection, source, all that kind of information. If you want to get fancy and add Alaska and Hawaii, it can be done. So you need to insert a new data frame, one for Alaska and one for Hawaii. So I'm going to, I wouldn't do this until you finish figuring out which symbols you want and which colors you want. So I'm going to move that down here. And I'm going to take this data frame right there and I'm going to zoom in on Hawaii. And I need to change the projection because the data is still an unprojected data layer. So I'm going to change the projection of the data frame. I'm just going to type in Hawaii. And there is a continental system. Oh, well that would be pretty good. So I'm going to go use that for Hawaii, and I'm actually going to change this data frame so that I know which one that is. I don't need this much ocean. There we go. Now I'm going to make a new, I'm going to close this layer and change that. All right. Now I'm going to insert a third data frame. I'm going to name that Alaska. I'm going to drag this data down into there. It's going to fill that in. And I've got to change that projection. So I'm going to go to Properties of the data frame, type in Alaska. Oh, and I want a projected one. Tricky. Okay, so now both of these have accurate projections, and I can just zoom in to Hawaii. Now the tricky part will be spending hours and hours and hours trying to decide where to put all this stuff in your map. And I think I would put the blue data frame in both of those so that I don't have the country coming through there. Oh, I used a different color. Dang. Okay, same here. Okay, so this is a way that you can add those extra bits of information. And then if I want, I can just pull that in there too. Although it's pretty small, I don't even know if you're going to see. Maybe for Alaska you will. Yeah, you do see Alaska in there, but not Hawaii. So then you can play around with your legend, and because your data values are the same, you only need to add one legend, which is really helpful. So whatever data frame you are is active, that's where the legend's going to come from. And it's also where the scale's going to come from. So again, I don't need country. Next. You know, here, let me go back a minute. Here is a place you could try having two columns. You can see if that works, and that's a good place to do that right there. I don't like the word legend, but oh well. I'll get rid of that later. You can add a border on your legend now and a background, and it automatically adds that gap. A lot of you have been getting notes from me about make sure you add a gap. And then some of these things can be changed later. You can get fancy with the polygons. And so now I have a pretty big ugly legend to deal with. Okay, so now I've got some stuff to work with here. In my legend, capital divorce, I need to say that it's capitals, but they're both divorced by population, so I really don't need to name that. In fact, that could be my title, percent of people divorced by in 1990, and then I could have capital and state there. So I might just turn this to capital. And then I might turn this to, oh look at that, it's down at the bottom there. Turn that to state, although it should be somewhat obvious because of the colors, but anyway. Okay. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to actually go into items, and under capital I'm going to choose a different format. Do I just want the layer name and the label, I think. Let's see what that did. Yes, and then this one, I'm going to do the state, do the same thing. The layer name and the label. I still have a problem with that showing up underneath there, and I think that's because I chose that first method. So I'm going to say place item in a new column. There we go. So that fixed that. Okay, so now I have my legend, and again, legend is pretty obvious, so I'm not going to show that. The other frames are light gray, so I'm going to go with that. And then I also don't like that these are so close together. So sometimes I cheat and I add a couple spaces at the end of this, and that moves that whole legend away a little bit. There we go. So now, now I have to kind of work around how do I get all of this in one nice looking layout.